When playing challenging games, you often find yourself experiencing a variety of different emotions. A combination of rage and disappointment as you fail a level countless times when close to a checkpoint or end goal. Pure bliss and relief when you overcome your hurdle, completing that very goal that tortured you for so long. Although it may sound unintuitive, without that experience of disappointment, you can't have the sensation of playing challenging games. Challenge is a pathway for players to achieve these immense feelings of satisfaction. It encourages them to both learn and master skills in the game, to overcome obstacles and puzzles.
2017's Bennett Foddy's Getting Over It is described by its creator as a game I made for a certain kind of person, to hurt them, and it lives up to this statement. The game is simple to understand but hard to master. You take control of Diogenes, a Greek philosopher who rejected all conventions of civilization, returning to the simplicity of nature and living inside a large pot. He wields a Yosemite hammer, used for gaining leverage against the 2.5D terrain and lifting his body to circumnavigate obstacles. The player's mouse acts as a guide for his hammer, evident by the transparent circle that returns to the hammer's position when the player's mouse is inactive. This control scheme works in tandem with the game's physics engine. The head of the hammer has plenty of friction with most surfaces, allowing for interesting movement techniques and scenarios as well as undesirable ones.
Upon first glance, getting over it seemed like it was going to be easy, but I quickly realized how unprepared I was. All it took for me to abandon hope of completing the game was 3 hours of holding back anger. The notorious first real challenge of the game, known as Devil's Chimney, left me fiddling with an overly sensitive movement system that either sent me back to the bottom or absolutely baffled how to climb up the narrow chute. With no hope of making progress and mastering the first 30 minutes of the game, I gave up and uninstalled it.
Unlike most who played this game, I knew what I was getting myself into and welcomed the challenge. Part of this was seeing countless Let's Players struggle with the climb during its initial spike in popularity, and telling myself, hey, this doesn't look that hard. Although I found the controls cumbersome at first, I got used to them quickly, and honestly, I was enjoying myself for the first 2 hours. I even found myself laughing at my own mistakes. This all stopped at Orange Hell. Not only was the steep edge of this hill difficult to navigate, but failure here resulted in a lot of lost progress, and in one case, a drop to the very beginning. Eventually I climbed Orange Hill and pushed onwards to complete the game. Although Devil's Chimney, Anvil Jump, Bucket Swing, and Ice Mountain were all challenging, nothing compared to that satanic citrus.
Now you may ask yourself, what kind of challenge does getting over it provide? And the answer to that is obstacles. The mountain that is getting over it is an amalgamation of community-made objects that Bennett turns into abstract obstacles for the player to overcome. The player has one simple goal, to get to the top. The only input that affects this outcome is their mouse. The player learns what the game asks of them and what they're capable of early on in the safe beginning area. Quickly, the player learns how to grapple onto exposed objects, rotate around a point like a protractor, and even pogo jump to high areas. There are no complex ethical decisions to be made, besides whether to give up or not, and there are no other players to rely on.
At face value, Getting Over It appears to be a purely execution-based game, which would mean it encapsulates physical challenge. While this is the primary form of challenge presented, the game also requires intellectual and emotional dexterity from the player. In moments of rest, it is more effective to analyze the upcoming obstacles and formulate a path to navigate through them efficiently. In those panic-inducing falls, a cool head will be able to minimize how much they fall and regain their lost progress within a reasonable amount of time. The difficult nature of this game is designed to infuriate most players, but those who can control their emotions will be able to climb effectively, relying on their mental fortitude and without having to fight their rage as it builds with each failure. The various blues songs that play after long falls seek to further infuriate the player, and it takes great willpower to overcome that. So in addition to physical skill, the game requires intellectual and emotional skill to maintain progress and composure. If a player can't think up a solution to an obstacle, then they're effectively stuck. If the player can't keep their cool, then they continue to tilt and underperform. They rage, and worst case scenario, give up and install the game. The player's success is regulated by the execution of strategies thought up by their mind, and ability to stay level-headed when things don't go as planned.
Getting over it is obviously a challenging game, but the way in which it alters its level of challenge relies on several factors. The game itself, although a single level, is often described in segments. The name of these segments were popularized in speedrunning circles with sequences of obstacles achieving different levels of difficulty based on their design and position relative to the rest of the map. The tutorial section will challenge you until you are familiar with the game's mechanics and develop sufficient techniques to overcome its obstacles. Orange Hole is challenging because of its steep angle, and a mistake here unravels a great deal of progress. The bucket jump incorporates a completely new and foreign gimmick that challenges the player to adapt to a new situation they have never encountered. Ice Mountain says, okay, you've conquered Orange Hell's steep angle, now do the same but with ice physics and invisible anchor points. Each segment alters the challenge by changing what it demands from the player, and what penalty it imposes should they fail to meet those demands. Both Devil's Chimney and Furniture Land enclose you in a tight space, but the latter lasts longer and changes from a vertical climb to a horizontal one midway. The anvil jump is answered the same as most other obstacles, pogo jump. However, the challenges increase by how precise and demanding this pogo jump is. You must have a precise angle, maximum push power, hold your hammer out correctly to grab the ledge, and a perfect pull so as not to fly off the wrong way.
Over the course of a typical run of the game, the relationship between the player and the game changes. The player's skill, power, and difficulty are all factors in this relationship, and can be broadly summarized as so. Early game, the player has next to no skill, and as such the game keeps the early segments at a low difficulty. The player has the same power and abilities now as when they finish the game. Mid to late game, the player has a moderate amount of skill, so to compensate, these segments amp up the difficulty by introducing new elements and increasing the penalty for failure. The player has the same power and abilities now as when they first started the game. Furthermore, on subsequent playthroughs, the player's skill is higher than ever. The difficulty of each individual section remains the same, and so will their power and abilities compared to the start of their first playthrough. The second or third playthrough has the player navigating the same obstacles as their first, but now that they are equipped with the knowledge of their previous runs, they make less mistakes and are able to complete their climb in less time. When a speedrunner plays getting over it, their skill is only elapsed by their future runs, but their relationship with all other aspects of the game stays the same. From analysing this relationship, it's valid to conclude that every player has the power to overcome any obstacle the game presents, no matter the difficulty, but whether they have the resolve to hone their skill is entirely up to them.
Following on from the relationship between skill and difficulty, the most important experience of a game involving challenge is flow. The best way to define it is the point where players are operating to the best of their abilities and are capable of expanding on their skills. It creates an optimal experience, one where players feel in control of their actions and choices, know the best solution for handling situations, and can zone out of reality into the game. Achieving this requires a match between difficulty and skill, no distractions, instant feedback to player input, and a clear objective. Early parts of the game have a clear sense of flow. The player learns a lot about the game and understands what effect their actions will have on their avatar. Mid to late segments of the game do not follow suit. The spikes in difficulty and introduction of new mechanics forces the player to either slow down and take a methodical approach, or suffer the consequences of acting hastily. However, in subsequent playthroughs, a paradigm shift occurs. Players can breeze through the less demanding early segments, which may even be boring or too easy for their heightened skill. Later sections are able to match that elevated skill, and flow is achieved as a player follows their new goal, recreating what worked last time.
Getting over it serves as an interesting enigma in game design. It seeks to avoid conventional practices by not including checkpoints, incorporating unforgiving level design, and utilizing a control scheme that is cruel for beginners. Despite these apparent flaws, the game succeeds as a lesson in challenge and difficulty. The player's physical, mental, and emotional skills are constantly put to the test with a complete run only achievable when managing all three. Challenge fluctuates in relation to skill, power, and difficulty. Flow is achievable for both newcomers and veteran players alike. It's a version of design tropes aided its success in the games market and internet community as a whole, which proves there is still an audience for uniquely difficult games. Developers should learn to have their players' progression well tuned for a gratifying learning experience. Furthermore, developers should take away that although immense difficulty can be a selling point for some, it's ultimately alienating for most. Getting over it likely won't ever be remembered as a masterpiece or must-play game, but instead be cemented as that one game everyone in 2017 couldn't get over.